This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
The views expressed on the following show are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, you got to remember, we were there all along, insisting that you like and share them on your favorite social media and with all your friends and neighbors, because Rudy's Health Insurance LLC presents the African American scene, and this is the edition that I called One More for the Road. Yes, it's the last African American scene, so here is your host one more time, and yes, you may chime in at 340-1590. It'll be your last chance. Here's your host, Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. I don't know how to top that, but Cliff's right. After great thought, I've decided after 17 years, tonight is my final show of the African American scene. Can't say forever, because we never say forever, because you never know if things could change, but this is the final show of the African American scene. I'm in the back nine of my personal life, and I wish to have more time for doing the things I want to do. I know there's going to be some friends of mine listening, and you're welcome to call in. And in the past, I've had people try to talk me out of this, but this time I want to do it. Each week, preparation for the show is tedious. I have to do the requisite research so that I can answer challenges to questions that may arise from the topics that I present. Sometimes not prepared as good as I should be, but overall, I think that I have been able to present you with lots of very interesting topics and information. Most important is I would like to thank Greg and Carol Wyatt for allowing me to do this show my way. Not sure I could have done this had with any other station and had the same freedom with anybody else. There were times when some of my topics made them uneasy, as well as some of my callers. I know they got pushback on some of my comments, but they never wavered in their support. And I am proud to say I have grown to love and respect both of them. Cliff has now been with me for years.
In fact, I Googled my name, and I found a profile at some strange social network out there where it declared that Cliff Desmond, description, African American, blah, 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 blah. And wait a minute, what was that? I'm African American, Rudy, and I've never been to Africa, and neither of you. But I'm not a Native American either. Well, I am a Native American. I'm not an indigenous American. There's a difference.
I agree. Cliff has monitored my calls, not at my request, and he dismisses those calls that will seem to be problematic. I could not have done this show without him. Thank you so much, Cliff.
We didn't like people filibustering you, because filibustering, that's for the politicians in the big offices somewhere.
Yeah.
Not all the wannabes, like the Sean Hannity wannabes that would call you and try to
Oh yeah.
try to derail you, but you know, you've never turned down a good debate, and I kind of hope that maybe you get a call tonight and somebody wants to try it one more time because I don't think you'd mind.
Not at all. Not at all. If they have been out there wanting to get to me, now's your chance. It's your last chance to do it. So,
He leaves the studio tonight untouchable.
yeah. Again, that number is 340-1590. Over the past 2 weeks, I did two shows that I thought you were pretty interesting. I covered the Project 2025, in which I provided you all the information that they plan to implement should they are successful in securing the White House this year. I also had my nephew on, which was very interesting, and he gave us kind of an overview of his 20 years in the Air Force, and he had a very interesting job. He went to 93 different countries, and he was a regular flyer with 3 different administrations. So he interfaced with Michelle Obama and Mike Pence and Joe Biden. Just really interesting, and it was interesting to hear the feedback he gave us on what it was like to work with some of those folks.
That archive is up on YouTube for your enjoyment, friends. WPSLTV.com.
Yeah, yeah, very, very good.
And yes,
Over
that's
the
his nephew, absolutely.
Yeah, that was, well, and even the information he gave us about having to build a survival hut in the snow. Remember he talked about that? I was flabbergasted.
He talked
with it.
about some things that made me a little nervous. I thought, can he get in trouble for talking about having bad commanders? But he never named any.
No,
He never named any.
no. He wouldn't, because he can't.
Right, and that's understandable. But I was a little worried. Is he going to get himself in trouble? But no, he was
he
clear.
knows the line, because remember one of the things he talked about is some people receiving disciplinary action, and including losing a stripe for making partisan statements about their the commander in chief as a member of the service. In August of 2007, I did a show on the St. Lucie Education Foundation. That was a fun show for me to do. I was the past president of the St. Lucie Education Foundation. I went back, and in those early days, we had CDs. And I still have a whole album full of CDs. So I went back, and some of them were clearly marked so that I could tell exactly what I talked about. And others were not so clearly marked, so I'm not sure exactly what the content of some of those shows were. But and we have Winnie on line 1. Yes, Winnie.
I will be listening to your show.
Yes, Winnie.
But I was one of your first.
Yes, you were. Yes, you were.
Time show.
Yeah, can you? Thank you very much. Thank you. Uh-huh. Well, thank you. Okay, Winnie. Thank thank you for being a faithful listener. Bye-bye. My goodness, she has been,
Faithful.
oh my gosh, she's been a faithful listener. Faithful. I don't think there's been anybody since I started the show who has been so consistent in calling in, asking questions, and I can remember when she was a diehard Trumper, but not anymore. She came around. She saw the light, as I would see it. As some of you listening would not say that, but then in one of my most enjoyable shows was with Dr. Juliette Lomax Homer. Probably forgot all about that one, huh, Cliff?
I was thinking about Dr. Moore at IRSC. He was one of your guests on the show.
Yes, he
a while
was.
back.
That was a good show too. Yeah.
I was trying to go back in YouTube to see how many archives we actually have of the African American scene. I found one 10 years old, but slow to load all
Yeah.
those shows up in one playlist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I got as far as 10 years, and then my time ran out, and I had to get back to the board over here.
Yeah. Dr. Moore, yes, you're right. That's I forgot about that one. I was sitting down and trying to think about some of the shows. Now, Dr. Homer's show stuck with me because she talked about medical careers. And she talked about how initially when she went to school for nursing and didn't want to tell anybody that she wanted to be a doctor, and then transitioned into medical school, and how much time she had to spend studying to be a physician. And then I followed that up with the Dawkins family. I don't know if you remember that one. The daughter and her father, who are doctors here in the community. And in that show, what I enjoyed about that is they gave me some insight into why more minorities are missing out on choosing to become doctors. And in many cases, they rule it out as being beyond their capacity when it is not beyond their capacity. And at the end, I will talk about one of the other things I've learned doing this show. One of my favorite shows was, and I couldn't find the young man's name. We had followed him from high school, and he went on to Bethune-Cookman. I think you'll remember this show. It was hilarious. And we were asking him what it was like in his freshman year. And he talked about his big, giant football player eating his food out of his refrigerator. Do you remember that?
No, but it sounds like a familiar story, a typical roommate story.
Yeah, he was eating his food. And I was laughing my brains out because I'd had a very similar situation when I shared an apartment with 4 other guys. And I'd come home from work and have something in the refrigerator I was planning on eating. And when I got there, it was gone. But that show really gave me, I really laughed my brains out on that. Greg allowed me to replay the entire I Have a Dream speech. And that went beyond the hour, but he was kind enough to let me play that whole speech. And that speech, I don't know, there's people out there that have all kinds of different ideas, but that speech still gives me goosebumps, to tell you the truth. That the man was quite an orator. In April of 2008, I did a fusion jazz show. I talked about fusion jazz, played some songs that were representative of fusion jazz, just trying to get people to grasp the idea of fusion jazz. And, you know, initially, because, you know, I was a DJ when I first got out of college, and some of the people at the station didn't like fusion jazz because they said it's non-traditional. But listen, fusion jazz has greatly expanded the opportunity for jazz musicians to make money. They weren't making a lot of money before. But the cool jazz format, which now is pretty much available throughout the country, has allowed jazz players to make money and to play a style of music that has incorporated a larger group of people. I had my son and his football teammates on a show in 2008, and they still talk about that show. I had them all on here, and they were laughing, and it was a big hoot. I know Carol got a big kick out of that. They were all on here, and they were talking and laughing, and I think they were all juniors in high school then, and that was another one of those things that I really enjoyed. I shared with you my experience in being a delegate at the Democratic National Convention in 2012, where President Obama got reelected. And I would dare say that is one of the highlights of my life. I'll never forget that. That was a very, very cool thing that I had an opportunity to be a delegate at a Democratic National Convention. That's buried there in the memory banks. I had one of my college mates, Keith Knight, who might be listening tonight, and he came on. He's a retired officer, and he talked about policing from an African American perspective, which I thought was important. We've had so many things about people being shot that were unarmed, this and that. And I think he gave us some keen insight into what it's like to be an African American in the police department, and some of the battles that you have as a police officer, and trying not to get gobbled up in the blue environment that would cause you to compromise some of your own principles. And he's also working on a book. I don't know where he's at with that, but he said he was going to be listening tonight, so maybe he can even tell us where he is. But those are some of my shows. And every February, over the last 17 years, I've conducted an African American trivia contest. And you were able to call up, answer the trivia question, and win a prize. I'm going to take a little break here, and that number is 340-1590. It's your chance, your last chance to get me. So make sure you take an opportunity if you really feel compelled to.
Be careful, Rudy does his homework. I'm just cautioning folks, you know. Well, I guess we'll be right back with more of the final episode of the African American Scene with Rudy Howard.
Hi, this is Rudy Howard, your independent insurance agent. This means I represent multiple companies which will allow me to match you with the best company for your needs. I am now officially Rudy's Health Insurance, LLC. So, if you need a Medicare plan or a health plan, call me. That number is 475-8856 or my Facebook page, Rudy's Health Insurance. I am ready to serve you.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
We now return to the final episode of the African American Scene with Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. How are you, Alex, my friend? I'm good. He said there's a... I'm not this... okay, all right. Oh, fine. Is that spring? Oh, Ozell in the background. Okay, all right. Well, I'm doing fine. I'm doing my last show. And how you doing, Ozell? I just I'm doing this final show, and well, I was probably a little bit of both. I would say that the MAGA people beat me down because sometimes trying to have an intelligent conversation that's rational and based on facts, I found more and more difficult over the years.
Contradiction of terms, yes.
Okay, here's my thoughts about that. Because of the hostility that Republicans receive when they say they're not supporting Trump, there's more people that are not supporting him than supporting him, I believe. I don't know it to be a fact, but that's what I believe because they don't. When I have talked to people outside the show, and they say to a friend or a family member that they don't support Trump, it causes for consternation within the family and sometimes breaks up friendships. So I think there's a bigger pool of people that are not supporting him that just don't say so. And so we'll see. And then I will also think that in Florida, I don't know, I can't speak for every place else, this anti-abortion situation is also riling up the female population in our state. So yes, I do. I do believe that. Yes, I do. Now, maybe I'm being naive, but I truly believe that because what I have learned, especially in the last 5 years, people are very reluctant to say openly that they're not supporting Trump if they're a Republican. So there'll be people walking into that booth to place that vote and won't have to tell anybody that they didn't vote for him. Oh, well, well, let me say this to you in all honesty. I don't think all of it is race related, but I think a substantial portion of it's race related. And the example that I'm going to use is, Ozell, think about a 5-year-old who, by the time they're 5, they'll tell you, I want to go to McDonald's. And why? Because they have been bombarded with messages over and over, and they've been taught that McDonald's is the best place to go. I think the same thing is true about conservatism for a large part. They've been bombarded with messages from Tucker Carlson, Fox News, and even the Washington Examiner. Those things are so heavily slanted. They like to pick on MSNBC and CNN, but there's not even any contest about the bias associated with them compared to what goes on in Fox. And Fox has it is, but you know what? People are buying it. People are accepting. No, I think the left wing echo chamber has not been very effective. I've seen some things that appear to be emerging as a more aggressive approach. There's an ad I saw the other morning on MSNBC where they blank out the faces, but they have people going up to apply for jobs with felony charges. If you haven't seen it, you got to see it. And they're being told that they can't get a job. And, you know, the whole idea of the ad is they can't get a job, but you want a president with a felony record to be president. But I think we have, the left has been done a very poor job, A, in communicating what they really stand for, and B, being willing to fight back against some of the aggressive tactics that come from the right. Well, thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you, Alex, for calling. All right.
All right.
Alex,
Wow, she's all right.
Alex worked for me when I was in New York City as the manager of the office there, and she was one of my rising stars. And we've always kept in touch since way back then. So that's really good. And that was her husband. So I have to tell you that was a good call. Uh, there were members of the minority community that had issues with me doing my show here at WPSL because they thought there was another show that another radio station I should do my show at. But I felt it was important to do it here. And as Greg said earlier, he felt my show was important to do it here too because it gives an alternate voice against the other things that are played here all day long.
That I often describe as your everyday average run-of-the-mill conservative talk radio shows. And this is not one of those. It's an alternative, which is a different perspective. That's all.
Exactly.
What's wrong with perspective? You can understand things when you check out somebody else's perspective.
Yeah, yeah. And what have I learned over the 17 years? People who have opinions different than mine are not evil. People will make false analogies to prove a point even when the analogy doesn't apply. Over 17 years, I have watched our society develop to the point where facts don't matter, only ideology. And that makes me very sad that we have evolved to the point where ideology overcomes all facts. Having to do research each week has increased my knowledge about a large amount of things. For some conservatives, ideology is the bedrock, and there's no room for compromise. And I think that's part of what Alex was saying. And I that has absolutely been my discovery for some. They see compromise as a loss, not as a process to get something done. So compromise is something they tend to want to shy away from. Again, that phone number is 340-1590. My biggest disappointments, I repeatedly tried to get people to call in about their support of Trump and why they feel he is best for America. No, I've had no takers. They just, whenever that subject comes up, I throw it out there, and I have not been able. You know, Cliff, how many times I've tried that. They just don't.
I don't remember anybody taking you up on it.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. They've no takers.
And I think they were afraid that you would beat them in a debate of some sort. And that's probably what it is, fear. You know, fear can. I'm sorry, Rudy, but it's the truth. You know, I think they're scared for the confrontation. Although debates have always been so gentlemanly all along, and nowadays are a little bit different, but still, there's a little some mannerisms that take place in debates these days, like there should be.
Oh yeah, but
people can disagree and talk about it. You know?
Well, the thing is, they should be fearful if they're going to come at me with garbage, because if they do, I'm going to tear them to pieces, because they're not going to have the requisite facts to back them up. Now, there's going to be people that will call up and they'll filibuster and talk about this and that and this and that and not have any facts. But that's not a call of value. But I have really wanted to, but since I didn't get those calls, I have made it my business to read articles, and I'm currently reading a book called The Cult of Trump, and where I can educate myself and try to understand why folks have fallen into this MAGA mindset. And one thing is for sure, I am convinced now more than ever the Electoral College has long outlived its original purpose, and is something that should be done away with, because it is a major contributor to our political divide. Yes, Bruce, how are you? Hello?
That's Brian.
Oh, yes, Brian. Oh, yes, how you doing, Brian?
Yeah, here's Carlos. I was just telling
Yes.
some of those callers famous, and they called other shows that I review on Tom Sullivan. Oh, okay. Okay, he's
Well,
talking to Brian, but you're next, okay? Hold on.
well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it, and I consider you a rational conservative, and I've always enjoyed my dialogues with you. And I appreciate your phone call.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, you've made some of your callers famous over the years. One of them in particular I've heard on the Tom Sullivan Show, and he's with us right now.
Oh, how are you, Carlos?
Hold on a second. We're live on the air. Hold on just a second. If you call back on the line, same line, I'll have an answer.
I won't, Carlos, that's for sure. And I really appreciate your phone call. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Same to you. We got another caller?
No, that was for somebody else in the station
Okay.
that wasn't on the air. And I had to explain to the gentleman that we're on the air right now. We can't.
Okay.
You can't ask for like the station folks that run the station during a live show, because they're not on the air with us. We're on the air right now in here. But if you call that same number back, sir, I'll bet you they could answer it in their office back there. No problem. But yeah, that's Carlos. I've heard him on Tom Sullivan Show many times.
Yeah?
He's gotten pretty popular. He's really gotten into this talk radio thing. Pretty good participant too, because whether he agrees or not, he calls in. He's consistent with the conversation, keeping the conversation going. You know?
He is. I enjoy Brian. I have always enjoyed. Way back in the beginning, when I started my business, and this is something you probably didn't know, Brian made my first computer for my business. And so Brian and I go back more than 20 years. And he and I don't always see eye to eye, but he is a conservative that I find reasonable and you can have a dialogue with. Now, as I was saying, I am convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt, the Electoral College is long outlived its usefulness and its original purpose, and is a major contributor to our political divide. If I had the power to do so, I would get rid of it immediately. That would mean politicians would have to run a campaign where they appeal to everyone, not just a segment of a state or a particular state. They would have to appeal to the broad swath of people. And I don't know why you can't see. Now, I know why conservatives don't want to change because they think the Electoral College favors them. And some believe that if there was no Electoral College, that New York or California would dominate. But here's the part that you miss. There's Republicans in California. There's Republicans in New York. And there's been competitive races for Republicans and Democrats in both states. But when you have a segment of the country that you can appeal to and not be appealing to the rest of the country, that sets up the divide. Can't anybody see that? Can you put your own personal ideology aside and understand the dynamic that takes place there? Just think about what's going on right now with one of his trials. One of Trump's trials is about false electors. If there was no electoral college, that wouldn't have ever even been an issue. It couldn't have been something that they could have attempted to manipulate. And if Hillary, I am not a Hillary lover, but Hillary beat Trump by 3 million votes and lost the election. Doesn't that trouble you? Because that says the vast majority of people did not support him. And then my conservative friends were irritated because there were protests by women's groups the weeks after the election. Well, why would you be surprised when he lost by 3 million votes? Duh. I think that's pretty straightforward, but just give some thought to what I'm saying about the Electoral College. If you had to run a campaign and you were required to appeal to everyone, Republican, Democrat, Independent, you'd run a different campaign. Because your campaign would be to expand your base, not protect your base. And that's where we are now, unfortunately. Too many campaigns are about protecting their base voters instead of expanding the base of voters. I'm down to the last 10 minutes. Well, you better get me while you can. Again, that phone number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590. I can say for sure that as we go down the stretch here in 2024, I am deeply concerned about the tensions that are continuing to develop between the left and right. Although I will say this, I saw a ray of sunshine this past weekend. The bipartisan passing of that funding bill, and while I'm not a great big Mike Johnson fan, he certainly showed me some moxie because he stood up there and he got that bill done. And Steve, how are you, sir? Uh-huh. Well, thank you. All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. You too.
I wish all the Steves that called this show were that nice. So the rest of them have about 9 more minutes to call in.
Yeah, you got
Before the door closes.
You got time. The door's going to close. But yes, I have.
You have made a lot of friends over the years too.
I have, and one of my other listeners, Frank, and we met and had lunch. I believe that was at Cheddar's, and we talked. And I saw him again recently at an IRSC basketball game. And Frank is a hardcore conservative, but I think he's always enjoyed having some dialogue with me, much the same as Steve. And for whatever reason, some of these real conservative guys enjoy having some dialogue with me, but because I try very hard not to speak from an emotional level. I try to speak from a factual basis and a rational basis about my position. And so if you want to attack me, you're going to have to attack me and tell me that my facts are wrong and that I'm not sure what I'm talking about. And I'm not going to let that happen, because if I don't know what I'm going to talking about, I'll say I don't know. That's for sure. But I'll tell you, it's been, I sat down, I started thinking 17 years. I can't believe I've been doing this for 17 years. And how many phone calls I've talked about. Families, one of my other favorite subjects I've talked about.
See, 52 weeks in a year, 17 years on the radio.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of shows.
Yep. A lot of math, too.
Yeah,
a lot of accomplishment and a lot of great things said that are still archived up there on YouTube now.
Yeah, so yeah.
Your legacy will live on.
Yeah, so if you want to go back and listen to some of my shows, as Cliff said, you can go to the website and pull up an archive and listen to one of my old shows. But now I have a whole folder full of CDs before you were doing it on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
I have CDs with the shows, and I got a whole album full of them.
Wow.
And I tell you, as I said, I pulled that album out and I was looking through it and tried to identify some of the shows that I did. And I got a little choked up looking at some of those shows, because some of them meant a lot to me. And I did a show on love. What is love? I did several shows on family. How important is your family to you? That's been good. I did some shows on Black conservatives. That's another show that I'm proud of, and for my listeners, I told you about a book, and I'm going to tell you about this book again. What Color is a Conservative by J.C. Watts. And he's a former leader within the Republican Party that they kicked out. And he makes the case in that book that minorities are inherently more conservative than most people think. And I agree with that completely. And even to the point of religion. And my friend Steve and I have had this discussion more times than I can count, that on Sunday, the vast majority of minorities are headed to some church somewhere. And the way most of us were raised, self included, there was no debate. Sunday morning, you got your butt up and you went to church. That was routine. And you went there and you were expected to be there and absorb the word. And in the summer, almost always Bible school. I think I went to Bible school every year till I was probably about 14, 15 years old. So, So one of the things that I find is very disturbing to me is when they talk about the lack of values in the minority community, because that is contrary to my experience. I watched people get up every day in Philadelphia, leave to go to work, and come home with dust all over themselves. And early in my life, when I lived in a segregated neighborhood in Philadelphia, we had state troopers, accountants, lawyers, engineers, all on the same block. And that is a thing that we lost with integration, because those role models were no longer within our neighborhood. But it is contrary to my own personal experience that the minority community lacks role models and people willing to put the effort in to earn a living. Now, there's some, just like there are some white folks the same way. But let me say this in closing. I sincerely hope that doing this program over the past 17 years has caused you to rethink your ideas about who minorities are and see them through a different prism. I'd like to thank all of you so much who have faithfully tuned in to the African American scene. God bless and be safe. And I will have all of you in my prayers. And so long. See you later. And you never know, I may reappear.